Our ancient sacred text is from Matthew 28, 1 through 10. After the Sabbath, as the first light of the new week dawned, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to keep vigil at the tomb. Suddenly, the earth reeled and rocked under their feet as God's angel came down from heaven. He came right up to where they were standing. He rolled back the stone and then sat on it. Shafts of lightning blazed from him. His garments shimmered snow white. The guards at the tomb were scared to death. They were so frightened they couldn't move. "There is nothing to fear here. I know you're looking for Jesus, the one they nailed to the cross. He is not here. He was raised, just as he said. Come and look at the place where he was placed. Now, get on your way quickly and tell his disciples he is risen from the dead. He is going on ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there." That's the message. The women, deep in wonder and full of joy, lost no time in leaving the tomb. They ran to tell the disciples. Then Jesus met them, stopping them in their tracks. "Good morning." The women fell to their knees, embraced his feet, and worshipped him. "You're holding on to me for dear life. Don't be frightened like that. Go tell my brothers that they are to go to Galilee and that I'll meet them there."
I'm so grateful to be here with you all this morning, and thank you for being here. Our community, starting just before the beginning of Lent, has midwifed 3 memorials this winter and spring, beginning just before Ash Wednesday. So death has been very much on my mind this season, even more than usual in Lent, which is a very somber season. I'm going to tell you a little secret about the life of a pastor now, especially when we have the privilege of walking with people immediately following a loss. This is that people ask us questions that we can't possibly have the answer to. Questions that all of us barely only ask ourselves in the middle of the night. Maybe even just as a whisper into the unknown. Questions like, do you believe in life after death? Questions like, is the resurrection real? For me, actually, these questions are one of the best parts of the job. But there's no way that I or any of us can answer these questions for anybody else. They come to the surface only when we are at our most real, our most human, our most vulnerable. And they open up space into the unknown. But here we are at Easter, a day of resurrection after all, and we are in the midst of a season of unimaginable. All of us. So let me attempt for a moment to try to answer some of these questions, or perhaps probe into more questions, even just sit for myself in front of you all. Some time ago, I experienced a sudden pregnancy loss. What I remember about that time is that it felt like I was moving underwater. That everything I was experiencing was as if I was looking at it through a magnifying glass. Some parts were very close up and sharp. Others were misshapen. Everything else faded out of view. And the most innocuous things took on new meanings. The stars became more than stars, they became messengers. And the trees became more than trees. They became companions. And everyday things that I never would have noticed in the past took on secret meanings, waiting to reveal new truths to me if only I had the willingness to look within them, or the interests. So my whole being during this time asked these questions, well, my consciousness could hardly form sentences. Why did life take root within me, only to release again into the unknown space it came from? Where did that life go? Could I still connect with her? Everywhere I went, there seemed to be signs and apparitions offering answers to these questions. Possibilities for where she might be, maybe speaking to me through a song or a star or a crack in the sidewalk. Like an empty tomb, my empty womb was pulling me toward needing to understand what happened. Our story today begins with an empty tomb. The Marys are arriving to attend to Jesus' body, to anoint it with ceremonial spices and oils that they couldn't the day before, because it was the Sabbath. And there they find the tomb empty. Not only that, but the earth reels and rocks. There's an angel who casually just rolls away a boulder and sits on top of it. No big deal. Who blazes like lightning, garments shimmering. These things echoing the supernatural earth quaking that took place days before in the Gospel of Matthew at Jesus' death by execution on the cross. In Matthew's telling, the sun is blotted out, and the curtain in the center of the temple is torn into two, the way we might rend our garments in the midst of grief. But the tomb is empty, and at first it doesn't seem like such good news. All it is more change. Not only is Jesus dead, and Jesus is not just dead, but Jesus is executed by a violent imperial state, but now his body is gone as well. And for some of us, tending to the body of a loved one who has passed is a gut-wrenching necessity for the processing of what has happened. And the quaking earth seems only to echo the grief that must be quaking through the Mary's bodies. The light only reflecting the shock of yet another rocking wave of grief. In fact, it's important to note here that the earliest resurrection story that we have is the Gospel of Mark. And it's earlier than you might think, actually, in the Gospel of Mark. Scholars believe that someone came along later and added a second ending. The true ending, the Marys arrive to the tomb, they find it empty, they find a messenger there who says, Jesus is gone, he is risen, and they go home. They don't see Jesus, and they don't tell anyone about what had happened. I think about the Marys, and I think about what they must have been feeling upon stumbling into that empty street. What signs and apparitions must have come to them? Walking through the world as if it was underwater, seeing everything as if it's through a magnifying glass. I wonder what images would have spoken to Jesus' beloveds, these Marys who went to the tomb to anoint his body and found it empty. Joan Didion's epic story, The Year of Magical Thinking, comes to mind. The book she wrote about the year following her husband's death, and saying, we might expect that we will be prostrate, inconsolable, crazy with loss. We do not expect to be literally crazy. Cool customers who believe their husband is about to walk through the door, about to return and meet his shoes. In our Christian tradition, We often understand resurrection as triumphant. That life has triumphed over death, that death will be no more, that Jesus came back and walked among the disciples again, and everything was restored as it was. But it's rarely acknowledged the terrible paradox that resurrection depends on death. It is only after death that resurrection can take place. And resurrection requires loss and grief. Maybe it even requires a little bit of chaos, some uncertainty. And at the moment we turn away from this loss, we also start to lose some of the truth of the resurrection. In that moment, it becomes more of an empty shell projection rather than a vessel through which we can find new life. Resurrection and grief come together. We cannot pull them apart. Grief and love come together. We cannot pull them apart. Another truth of our Christian tradition that is rarely acknowledged is that after the resurrection, Jesus didn't stay. Resurrection didn't mean that he was able to return to community, to have a long and happy life with his beloveds into old age. No, for all intents and purposes, his execution by the state was final. Just as the bombs our country is raining down on schools in Iran today are final. Just as the kidnappings and the deportations and the killings of our government upon precious human beings is final. Jesus did not return to community again, but he did come to them in signs and in apparitions, often appearing without them even recognizing him first. Our story this morning is one of those stories. The empty tomb and the Marys encountering Jesus. But other stories that we find in the Gospels, two disciples are walking on a road to Emmaus and they have a whole conversation with a stranger, they think. And they invite him to dinner, and it's only in the breaking of the bread that they recognize him on the road to Emmaus. In a different story, the disciples have returned to their former life. They're fishing in a lake. And they see a stranger on the lake who says, "Throw your net on that side." They toss the net and they pull in more fish than they could have ever imagined. Then they realize the stranger was Jesus. He shows them his wounds. He offers them insight and wisdom and grace and undeniable love. Because one thing that we don't also think about often about the communities that were left after Jesus' death is the guilt that they held. That grief often comes with our sense of things being undone, not left undone. The things we wish we had done differently. And that the disciples' experiences of Jesus that is appearing to them were experiences of love and experiences of grace. To remind them that they were still loved by Jesus. And then he disappears. Just as quickly as he came. One night, in the early months following my pregnancy loss, I was looking up into the night sky, thinking about how brief that it was that this life had come to visit me, but how big her presence had been in my life, in my heart, and in my empty womb. I was thinking to myself how this life nested within me had been like a meteor streaking across the sky, illuminating everything for a brief moment, a lightning strike of love that was undeniable, incontainable. And even as I was thinking that thought, the sky opened up, and a star, a shooting star, forged its path across the sky, swinging from east to west like a blazing banner. And I knew, in a moment of insight, in a moment of grace and undeniable love, I knew right then and there that it was her. Yeah. That it was my daughter. She was right there with me, not in her body, but she was there. Biblical scholars call the collection of stories of Jesus' appearance to the disciples following his death, resurrection stories. The appearance at the lake, on the road to Emmaus, outside the tomb. And there are three qualities of them that I want to highlight for us today. First, something truly unimaginable happens. Something unlikely and serendipitous and wild. Like Jesus appearing at the table with the disciples, even though the doors were locked. Something unimaginable happens. Number two, the sense of love is restored. Insight is unveiled, wisdom is opened, reassurance is given, love is there. And three, the unlikely and transcendent experience generates a creative impulse. It creates meanings. And it compels the disciples to go and do something with this meaning. The disciples, despite the very real threat that they face at the hands of empire, the danger that they just witnessed through the execution of Jesus, they still want to tell others about this. The story we're reading today is an example of that. They want to keep sharing that the love Jesus taught about during his life, that it continued to exist here too on the other side, even on the other side of his death, as he is no longer with them. Beloved, the resurrection is a love story. It's a love story born out of grief, born out of love that continued on in the wake of loss, the love that was still rising and is still rising still. And so I need to tell you this, that if you are grieving right now, if you are feeling like you are walking through the world as if it's underwater, like you're peering at everything as if it's through a magnifying glass, if you're seeing signs everywhere, keep looking. Look for the resurrection stories. Take in the signs and the symbols, the dreams and the apparitions, make meaning of it all. We are supposed to be grieving right now. And the only way to find ourselves to our own resurrection is through the grieving. Because as we watch the bombs rain down in Iran, Lebanon, and Palestine, and in the homes of our beloveds who stay home to protect themselves from being kidnapped, as we watch our earth from being plundered for resources and we participate in its plundering, as we drive to church past the homes of people living outside, as we midwife and witness our beloveds in our community moving toward death and beyond death, I still wonder to myself, do I believe in resurrection? Do I still believe it's really possible for us to find another way of being and loving and living together here on this precious planet? Beloved, the only answer that I have for you here this morning is something unlikely and ridiculous and serendipitous and wild. I do believe in this. May it be so.